All right. Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today. I am Karyn Knox, Chief Development Officer for Educated Choices Program. We are a nonprofit organization who educates students and communities about the impact of their food choices on human health, animals, and the environment. Our contribution to the fight against climate change has been recognized by the Global Warming Mitigation Project, the Eat the Change Foundation, and most recently, the authors of the compelling book, Bright Green Future. Today, I am honored to be here with Trevor Decker Cohen, co-author of this fantastic book. In the book, he and Dr. Gregory Schwartz share with us what's been called a blueprint for crafting the sustainable future of our dreams. Staying true to Trevor's way of speaking about the future of our planet without going down the road of doom and gloom, the book shares stories of ordinary people who have done extraordinary things to make a positive impact on the planet and shows us that we can all be a part of the change too. Today, Trevor's going to speak a bit about what a truly sustainable future looks like and how we can all contribute to it. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to Mr. Trevor Decker Cohen.
Thank you so much, Karyn, and it's wonderful to see you all here, and thank you for all the work that ECP does to further sustainable food choices. And I'm just really honored to be here today and chat with you all. I'm going to share my screen for this presentation, and let me know if you can all see it. Great. So I'll just give with a brief introduction to what the book is about and how it ties into the way we look at the world around us to envision a truly sustainable future for this generation and future generations to come. So Greg and I wrote Bright Green Future. We started working on it almost 5 years ago. And it began at a time where most of the talk around climate change and environmental issues was primarily focused on the problem. So the issues we face in terms of climatic temperature rise, environmental degradation, and a number of climate change is the ultimate multi-system problem. And so all of the myriad of different challenges that we face. And so what we wanted to do was focus on the stories of people who are working on responses and solutions to not just mitigate carbon emissions, but to create a future that we want to live in, and to create a world in a way that's tangible at the level of our communities, where we can see an improvement and a roadmap to create something better, not just one that avoids the catastrophe of climate change, while also responding to it at the same time. And so we embarked on a 5-year project of interviewing over 200 people who are working on different climate solutions across a wide variety of areas, from energy, from industry, to how we're thinking about growing food, to the way we're thinking about designing our cities to be more sustainable. And out of those different stories and out of those different people we talked to, some really concrete ways of thinking started to emerge that they had in common. And these different ways of thinking, we found it to be really helpful when thinking about how do we design solutions for our communities that both make sense for the unique challenges that we face in all of our various unique communities that we're a part of, as well as respond to climate change and creating a sustainable world. And so I'm going to open up this presentation with a question to you all, based off of your various experience in sustainability, both either professionally or in your the rest of your life. What types of thinking do you think we need to envision a sustainable society? So I'm just going to open it up to anyone who wants to speak on that.
I want to say it needs to be a compassionate society.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Think, yeah, if anything, if we're facing such such a huge challenge, like if we get the human compassion part right, a lot of other good things will follow. So completely agree with that.
Shifting a focus from a thought process of what can we take from our planet and focus on more what we can give to our planet so that there's something left.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. We've definitely created a very extractive economy, both in the way it treats the planet as well as people, that system. So yeah, thinking about what we could give back is really important.
How can we effectively educate this rising generation so they can easily spread this information so people have access to it, and we can be all on the same page at one point?
Yeah, knowledge and skill sharing is so important in that. And just, I think that also gets back to like a collaborative mindset too, as well, in being collaborative in how we share information around the solutions, rather than just holding them really close and holding that information close to ourselves as a purely competitive advantage. I think it's really important.
Reframing how sustainability looks, to rather than doing without, just doing better with what we have and making the things we want in better ways.
Yeah, that's also, yeah, great point. We have, yeah, a lot of the pieces to the puzzle already. A lot of it is how we put it together. We have the right technologies. We have we have the knowledge in many senses. It's how we share it, and the will we have to make it happen and reframe the way we think about the tools and resources we have.
I just wanted to add on, I want to say, still having a mindset that even if our generation can't complete a certain project, that they're at least making that progress for future generations, that we don't get bitter that we may not see the future that we're trying to build.
Yeah, that's spot on. I've often thought about this work we're doing as kind of a multi-generational relay race, where we're working on one part of it, and you know, it took hundreds of years to get into this issue that we're facing right now in our environmental crisis. It will take more than one generation to get out of it. So that's a really good point too. Having our expectations be, this is not going to happen in a year, 10 years, maybe 20, maybe this is a 50 to 100-year journey. Any other things people want to share?
Take a society that puts their money where their bite is.
What do you mean by that?
But we're gonna have to really focus on how we can use our money in different ways to affect sustainable society, especially in regards to our food systems.
Right. So not just saying we're going to do these things, but actually putting resources there, more than lip service. Yeah, I think that is a important thing to bring up, because it's easy to get for companies to do greenwashing, to say, oh, we're all like, we're Chevron and we're all about the future of energy, but we're still drilling a lot of new gas for new fossil fuels. Great. Any other last thoughts before we move on?
I was just going to add that I think that we have to reframe what we consider wealth and luxury. I think we have definitely used the ideas of extraction and exploitation to fulfill goals of luxury. And I just wanted to hear your comments on that issue.
Yeah, that is also a really good point. Yeah, we tend to think of, and this gets back to some points that a few other people made, of we tend to think of wealth as something that's zero sum and that's taken from either other people or from natural systems, and we're not thinking about balance. And we're, that's obviously a huge issue in terms of how our society, the images that we have of wealth and the pressure of what that looks like in a material way, and wealth being solely defined as materialistic and things that we can either just acquire and take out of things, rather than wealth being a combination of many different things, including relationships we have with people and our environments. Great, yeah. So thank you all for your contributions. There were some really, really insightful things said, and I appreciate you sharing. So there are obviously many different types of thinking that we need in order to envision a sustainable society. In this presentation, I'm going to share three key ways of thinking that came up in the conversations with people who I interviewed for the book. And these are obviously not the only ways of thinking, and you brought up many more that are important to think of. But I found these were some of the common threads that I found were really helpful to me in thinking about how to create a sustainable future. And these three types of thinking, these three transformative ways of thinking are, number one is systems thinking, which is ultimately finding the deeper patterns that are hiding in plain sight. So going a little deeper behind what we see at the surface level of what's happening, and exploring how things are interacting at a larger level, and what are the overarching patterns that we see in our society, our economy, and the environment. Secondly is community thinking. And so that's all about embracing local people as beneficiaries of change. And so not just, switching to renewables, but thinking about how can renewables empower communities through job creation and wealth creation in communities, across the world. Then thirdly is regeneration, which has become obviously a little bit of a buzzword these days, but is essentially how do we create systems and communities that grow stronger and healthier over time. And so rather than thinking about solely extraction and things degrading over time, but setting up systems and communities that grow stronger with every season, with every year, with every harvest, that they actually get stronger and more resilient, rather than degrading, whether it's degrading the environment or degrading a community, or degrading the built environment and built world around us. So I'm going to get into a little deeper into all of these concepts, and then we'll open it up for a discussion at the end. So first off, systems thinking. In a nutshell, systems thinking is about thinking about how things are interconnected rather than disconnected. Thinking about things rather than linearly as going from point A to point B, but circularly. So how does the end of one cycle begin the next cycle? It's about thinking about things rather than in silos and existing separately, but as multiple things emerging together. It's about looking at the whole rather than solely all of the parts as distinct and separate things. So I'm going to open this up with a little thing I like to call the parable of the techie and the farmer, which really illustrates the kind of the difference between traditional reductionist thinking versus systems thinking. And this came from a conversation that I had. I used to live in the Bay Area and had this one conversation with, I guess, somebody who you might classify as like a stereotypical techie, somebody who's involved heavily in the tech world. When I asked him what he does for a living, he said, I am working out of 6 different businesses right now, so I can't really tell you what I do. I do everything. And we were having a conversation about permaculture and regenerative farming. And he was ultimately really skeptical. He said, I don't really understand the point of farming organically or farming in a way that seeks to regenerate the soil. Because, you know, if we really wanted to sequester carbon in the soil through practices that draw carbon into plants and then through roots into soil, wouldn't we just put a giant air capture system on that land? If we just tore up that land and put that giant air capture system, then we'd be able to sequester a lot more carbon and have a better effect on climate change rather than whatever small amount of carbon you could sequester in a permaculture or organic farm. And it made me think, because it's a classic example of how it's only focused on the one thing of sequestering carbon, that way of thinking. Which is a lot of the way we think oftentimes in our economic system of how do we optimize this one metric. It's very, very focused on that one thing, not taking into account that, yeah, you may be able to sequester more carbon by having a giant air capture system on that land per acre, but you only are doing that on that acre. You're not creating soil health. You're not growing healthy food. You're not providing better water retention for times in drought, or serving in times of flood to absorb water better. You're not thinking about all the other social benefits that come with having a organic or permaculture farm through farm education. And all of these other holistic benefits that come in addition to whatever carbon sequestration that land might have. So it really illustrates the difference between that reductionist thinking versus a holistic thinking and thinking about the larger system of a farm and its benefits that it can produce, which is not traditionally how even though it seems obvious that we should be thinking about that, maybe to folks in this meeting, oftentimes we're solely like single metric driven in our economy and the way we approach things, and we see that manifested as the pattern of how we design things and how we've structured our world. So we see that often the way we've designed both cities and farms, we've designed them as monocultures, where in a city we're maximizing the amount of residential and commercial and industrial things and production in different areas, and separate and separated from each other, and optimizing the different metrics around each one of those. We see the same thing on farms, where we're just growing soybeans all in one huge area, or just growing wheat, or just growing corn in one area. And we've kind of approached this like reductionist, like how do we optimize this one thing, in both the way we design the world we live in cities, as well as farms, and how we grow food and we produce things for ourselves. And so this is an example of how we can reframe that and think of bringing those systems and those interdependent things, from growing food, from living and habitation, to to where we go out to eat, to where we work, and bringing them together as kind of one system. And so this is an example of Agritopia, which is a community in the middle of suburban sprawl in Phoenix, Arizona, that decided to, rather than just have a purely residential area, they built an organic farm. It actually used to be a farm, and they were expanding subdivisions out into the countryside. They had an organic farm, and then around it, they have a residential community with a mix of different, not just solely single family, but multi-family residences. They have a school. They have even like a senior living area. So even a diversity of different types of living and price points within that one area. And then they also built a restaurant, a coffee shop, and then kind of a maker space, which they put in the old hangar of the barn of this shed that used to be on the old farm there. So they're reusing that space. And by doing that, they bring in so much more. They grow food for the people who live in the town, who live in the community around them. People can participate and learn about farming through the organic farm. They can also walk to eat and to explore the number of different shops that are at within this one area, kind of bringing together all of these different systems from where we live to commerce to growing food, all in kind of one area, combining them together and thinking of like how these different systems interact rather than completely as separate things. So then we're gonna move on to community thinking, and this is really about embracing communities and adapting solutions to communities, and communities and people who live in them as the beneficiaries of the change. So in the traditional fossil fuel energy system, most of the beneficiaries of that system are fossil fuel companies and the larger utilities. They're the ones who are making all of the money and profiting ultimately off of energy, and what's contributing to the destruction of our planet and our environmental crises. Obviously, we benefited some way from being able to drive and turn on a light bulb in our house, but ultimately the wealth that's being created is going to a select few companies and utilities. Where in contrast, as we shift to renewables, it's important to also be thinking about how we can also shift the beneficiaries of that change from not just a handful of energy companies, but to the actual communities where that energy is consumed and where it's also produced. I think a benefit of renewables is its ability to be more decentralized. And so we see different programs, including community solar, where people pool their resources to create solar farms, to community choice energy, which is really big in California, which basically cities have come together to choose where their energy comes from, and then choose how and actually manage like an energy, a kind of like a small energy nonprofit energy company where the profits from it go back to community projects, or are given back as dividends to the people who live in those communities. And there's also a priority too on hiring on local projects, and hiring local people to enter into that industry. And it's community choice energy, especially in the state of California, has grown to almost half of all residents get energy in this way. And so there are many different kind of emerging ways to think about how we tie the benefits of the growth in renewables to benefit the community in both wealth creation as well as the energy services that we get. And then it's also important to think about how we adapt solutions to local needs and visions. So this is an example of Coalfield Development, which is a nonprofit in West Virginia that trains laid off coal miners to transform old surface coal mines into food forests, and has created a number of different social enterprises around this new economy that's transitioning from the old fossil fuel economy, including construction and building affordable housing in the area, developing many different farm businesses. There's a solar company attached to it as well, and they're all kind of collaborating in this ecosystem of social enterprises that are highly adapted to the unique needs in coal country. But the same could be said about many different areas of the need to really adapt to the visions as well as the strengths and values in each area. I know that this organization talks a lot about their values being focused on gumption, grit, and grace, which are they're really highlighting how, you know, Appalachian values can be drivers of this switch to a sustainable society too, in being able to make things really well, and being able to reuse things really well, and kind of the knowledge of living in harder country in the mountains there. This is another example in a Native American reservation in South Dakota, the Pine Ridge Reservation, where Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation has an indigenous-led organization that is training youth in both construction and farming, as well as building renewable energy, in order to address both a food shortage that exists in the area around lack of access to healthy food, addressing a housing shortage where there's not currently enough housing. So they're actually building housing and training youth in construction in a place where there's really high unemployment, up to 70% in some communities there. So both creating new jobs while addressing multiple community needs at the same time. And so it's layering multiple community benefits, and it's kind of combining both that systems thinking with a community focus too. And then so lastly, we have regenerative thinking, and that's about giving back more than we take in order to create stronger systems, and regeneration systems and communities that are more resilient to times of crises, as well as stronger and more robust, and have a positive impact on the communities that that are shifting and moving away towards this sustainable society. And so regeneration can be thought of in many different ways. It can be thought of around regenerating the land. So this is regenerative, the Regen Ag Alliance, which trains, it's a small organization which trains migrant farm workers on how to do agroforestry and growing a combination of nuts and different crops, and doing it in a way that recharges the soil. And the leader of this organization, the founder of this organization, Reginaldo Hazlet Marroquin, talks about soil as a kind of a battery that you're recharging, and you're recharging it through everything you're putting back into it, through leaf litter, through manure, through everything in that agriculture system that goes back into it, so that the next cycle it starts off stronger, and then the land is able to produce more by everything that you've put into it. But regeneration can also be thought of in a material sense as well. So this is a company, Ronin 8, which takes lithium ion batteries that are waste, that are would be considered useless and after the end of their life cycle, as well as e-waste, which often ends up shipped to other countries where it's processed in ways that are really toxic to the communities where it ends up. And they use a system that's actually based off of kind of like a water and shredding system that actually uses sound energy in kind of this massive tuning fork to separate out all of the different metals within our electronics and batteries, so that we can start thinking about our next cycle of products as a next generation, and thinking about how do we really regenerate everything that is all the diverse materials that we use in our modern high-tech society and economy into the next generation of products, and not solely thinking about how do we develop the new cool disruptive gadget, but how does that gadget's parts become used for the next generation of gadgets. And then lastly is about regeneration of people, and of communities, and creating resilient communities, and also creating confidence, and creating empowering people to start their own things, and to kind of pass on learning that they've had to the next, to the outside of wherever they learned it, to the next area. And so this is an example of Soul Fire Farm, which empowers Black and Indigenous farmers through farm education to regenerate land and their own communities. After the program ends, people often go on and start their own farms, and start their own kind of, not just farms, but community farm education programs throughout the country. And so really passing on education as an opportunity to continue regeneration. And so I'm going to open up this talk for a brief discussion. If anyone has any thoughts about the presentation or any questions for me, I first want to, before we do that, sorry, I want to hand it off to Karyn, who has a couple questions for me, and also wanted to let you know that you can learn more about the book at brightgreenfuture.com. $5 of every book sold will go back to Educated Choices program. If you buy it through the website throughout this next week, we have a special link for it, but any purchase over the next week, if you get the book on the website, you will donate $5 for every book sold to Educated Choices program. And also I would love to get in touch if anyone wants to continue this conversation or talk about other collaboration ideas. You can reach me at trevor@brightgreenfuture.com. Would love to chat with any of you. So yeah, Karyn, I'll turn it over to you, and then for any questions, and then we can open it up for group discussion.
Thank you, Trevor. That was eye-opening, as is the book. So if you guys haven't read it yet, I highly encourage you to do so. It's so inspiring. So I do have a couple of questions for you, Trevor. First of all, obviously there are many, many things that people can do to improve the outlook of the planet's future. In your opinion, what role do food choices play in this fight against climate change and the path towards a more sustainable future?
Yeah, so yeah, I think food choices are extremely important. I mean, they're obviously, I think what I'm really passionate about is health of the land, and how we design agriculture systems to make the land healthier. And there is some recognition recently around the role that animals play in farm systems in contributing to healthy soil, which is a valid point. But we also need to think about the reality that animal agriculture uses up like 1/3, if not more, of all land on Earth. And that is just not sustainable to be using that. And especially in the way a lot of that animal agriculture occurs and happens, is in a way that is obviously cruel towards animals, as well as degrades the land. And so the current state of things is extremely unsustainable. And so I think that food choices and the work that you're all doing is extremely important for thinking about how do we eat a lot less meat so that we don't have to be taking up a third of all land on Earth for animals and degrading a lot of it at the same time. And so, yeah, I think there's been a revolution in meat alternatives recently that, as you all know, that are really make it possible to eat a lot less meat in our diets, whether or not we go vegetarian or vegan. There's also an opportunity to eat like 90% less meat, which is what I've done in my own life. I don't really eat meat very often, and I think moving towards there is extremely important for both the health of our land, for carbon and methane emissions, for so many different things.
Well said, Trevor. Thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to ask was, I think that all of us find ourselves in a place of trying to figure out how we personally can be part of this change. What do we individually have the power to do besides choosing the food on our plate? So what do you feel is the first step that a person should take in deciding how to be a part of this movement and how to personally help create a healthier planet?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. If you're already working for Educated Choices program, you're probably already doing it. But I think the thing that has been most helpful for me to navigate just like the sheer overwhelmingness of climate change, and there's kind of a feeling, because it's so overwhelming, that like we need to solve all of climate change and as an individual, and that if we are unable to do that, which is obviously we as individuals we can't solve all of climate change, then it's not even worth trying. And so I think the point that or one of the goals of the books is to show that there are so many different ways to get plugged in to being part of a renaissance to heal the planet and empower our communities. And whether it's through farming, whether it's through energy, whether it's through policy, whether it's through transportation, to community building, to shifting the ways that our economies are set up. There's so many different ways to contribute to it. And I found that these kind of a couple questions really helped me in finding ways to get involved, and ways to have an impact on the planet that's positive. And those were first off, just like asking, like, what is my vision of the future? Like, what do I really care about? What's really important to me? And then looking for people who are already working on that vision in the places where we live. And so that those could be organizations or different campaigns that are working on those things already. But I think being in addition to finding organizations where you could also see yourself as being able to contribute to it through your skills that you have, or as well as being in a community of people who you could see yourself hanging out with, or could see yourself like really being a part of and growing there, because it's really hard work to work on any kind of solution or response to an issue that we face in our communities. It's really important to have like a rewarding social experience on top of that. And so, yeah, in the things that I've gotten involved with I found that the things I stuck with were the ones where I found like a fulfilling community of people at the same time. So finding vision that resonates, finding people who are working on that, and then finding friends, basically.
I love it. All right, Trevor, we have about 15 minutes left. I would love to open it up to questions from our audience. So this is your chance. Speak on up and pick Trevor's mind.
I would love to ask a question to Trevor.
Yeah.
Hi, Trevor. So we hear very often from people who watch the news and feel very powerless, understandably. And usually our message is what you said: don't try to do everything. Nobody can do everything. Try something, and collectively, we can really achieve a lot. Whether, like you said, is food reduction, or eating less meat, or reusable energy reduction, etc. I totally understand with aligning our mission with our values, and not necessarily attack the issue as an all or nothing. Do you agree that most of us should take baby steps and then build on that? Or do you think we should challenge people to do as much as they can, as soon as they can? What do you think is more productive?
Yeah, well, I think yeah, that's a good question. I think it definitely depends where you're coming from. Like if you're already like have involved in making sustainable individual choices in your life, then yeah, I mean, maybe you could get really committed towards going really far on that. But yeah, I think there's something to be said about starting with something small and building up, rather than trying to change everything at once. Just in terms of like personal change in my own life. Anytime I've tried to change everything at once, I've done it for like a week and then given up. But if I've started with one thing, then maybe I've been able to build towards something down the road. But yeah, there's kind of I feel like there's two types of change to make through our actions, and one is those personal choices that we make in our lives around sustainability through food choices, and energy choices and so forth, and transportation, and then there's choices we make in spending our time on collective action through getting involved with different organizations. Just a couple examples on the power of the individual to work on a collective thing. We're seeing the impact of the Green New Deal through Sunrise, as well as Citizens Climate Lobby, and what they've done in advocating for carbon pricing and lobbying over like a 10-year period. And that's all happened through people joining local chapters. And even though it's a larger, bold vision, it like the involvement happens locally, and the involvement happens as an individual, as part of a kind of local group. But collectively, these groups have had an enormous influence in terms of many of the things we've seen put forward in the current reconciliation bill. That would have a huge impact on national sustainability. So we do have a lot of power as individuals when we're working and exercising it in a collective sense. In addition to that power, as we make kind of personal choices in terms of like how we consume things and use things.
Thank you so much. And if you don't mind me just adding, I think you referred to this already, but a lot of people also feel that the fear of not being perfect and failing here and there, which nobody's perfect, not even the most strict plant-based person, correct? So I think the message is do what you can whenever you can to the best of your abilities according to your circumstances. And I would like to know what you think about that. That way people are not in fear of being judged, because all of us, I'm sure, are making mistakes day in and day out. but we're trying our best. And I think we need to give people the benefit of the doubt that sometimes all they can do is so much, and go with it and encourage and inspire and support people along the way.
Yeah, totally. And oftentimes sustainability and climate change is like, while majority of people are concerned about climate change, it ends up being like the 10th thing on their list when we have bills to pay, when we have just getting through a work week. And so I think it's important to not be shaming people for not being perfect in something that is obviously they deem to be important, but is maybe far down on the list. I think that would kind of, it oftentimes stops action if we feel like we're going to fail or going to be judged really intensely for our actions.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? This is
Yeah.
Carol Sullivan.
Hey, Carol.
Hi, I appreciate your book. And the one thing I've been really trying to work on is linking the churches with the whole idea of sustainability. We have all sorts of meat eating that goes on in my churches, and it's extremely frustrating that you would think that the churches would be into, like there's songs about, all creatures, but, beautiful, etc. But how can we do that? Because I also think the most powerful force in the world has to be our churches also. And if we can somehow link those two groups together, I think it would be a really good thing.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Are you familiar with Interfaith Power and Light?
No.
Okay. Yeah, they're a really cool organization that brings together faith. It's like a multi-faith coalition around sustainability and climate change. I think they have chapters in most states. And they're doing really inspiring work. So yeah, if you're interested, you might recommend just going to their website and seeing if there's a local interfaith and power and light chapter in your area or in your state. And then I think a really inspiring speaker in the intersection of faith and sustainability and climate change is Katharine Hayhoe. And I think it's, sorry, I don't know how to spell her name, but she talks, she's very involved in both her Christian church and her Christian identity and her faith, as well as an extremely strong climate activist. And she has gives some very inspiring talks on that intersection.
Can you spell her last name?
Let me look her up.
Or close enough that I can Google it?
I think it's like Katharine Hayhoe. Hayhoe.
Okay, great. And kind of know this, I mean, I talk about the meat eating, but also even in terms of, this happened to me maybe about 10 years ago. There's a lady that was the head of our community area. She goes, there are entirely too many churches in this neighborhood. And what her perspective was is a lot of these churches, they only go maybe a few hours on Sunday, Wednesday, maybe an hour or two. And, you have people that don't have a place to live, and you have all of these kind of empty buildings taking place with these churches. And I don't know if you want to address that too, since you had that part in there about, the construction of housing and things like that. I thought that might be an interesting thing to bring up as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a really good point. I think there's like already within churches, there's already a built-in community. And I know that like there's been a big collaboration between, I know, Unitarian churches and Citizens Climate Lobby, between like the the congregations there are very involved in that. And in my own connections with people, I've met a lot of people who are kind of like their church groups have gotten a lot more involved in sustainability in terms of like they're either through education and discussions, as well as different actions they're taking. I know one church I just talked to is doing like a sustainable design workshop this in a couple weekends to talk about like sustainable design in the foothills.
Thank you.
Of course.
Carol, Lorena just shared a link in the chat as well for christianveg.org that may be of interest to you as well.
Oh, if you'll, Lorena, I already am, and I'm in that group. Remember, I'm the person that we went to lunch one time in Atlanta, and yeah, that's how I got to know you.
I do remember, Carol. So glad you remember Christian Veg. Excellent.
All right, folks, I think we've got 5 more minutes, and I am afraid it might be a hard stop. So I just want to keep that in mind so we don't get disconnected mid-conversation.
Hi, I was wondering if I could ask a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Trevor. My name is Lisette, and I was wondering if you have any advice for kids who are interested in climate change action. I have a 10 and 12-year-old, and they're both super hardcore, honestly. we have your book. My oldest one's already reading it. We're having difficulty finding a community of similar-minded people. My older one actually tries to bring up climate change to some peers, and she usually gets shut down. Like, we don't want to hear about climate change, and we don't want to talk about it. And she finds it very upsetting. So I don't know if there's anything out there that maybe I can find some kind of group or a network, or what resources you might suggest.
Yeah. How you said your kids are
10 and 12.
10 and 12. Okay. Yeah. So I haven't done as much research in terms of like resources for children who are younger. I'm sure there's like a lot of, there's probably a lot of like resources and courses out there I've heard of. But in terms of like organizations and like participation, I just remember my like that I did was like in Pals of Planet Earth, which was like a small like school group where we did like canned drives when I was like really, really little. But I do know that Sunrise movement definitely is like, I would say a lot of their chapters are run by high schoolers. I think that might be maybe a little older. But yeah, I think they're generally like really open to kind of like this all age youth movement. But I'm sure there's probably even younger movements, but I know Sunrise might be like a good resource because they are younger, but yeah, it's obviously up to you with your comfort level and high schoolers. And
okay, yeah, I mean, that's definitely something. So
yeah, I think a majority of their chapters are run by high schoolers and often freshmen or seniors.
Okay, great, thank you.
Of course.
Lizette, in addition to that, there is an organization called teachheart.org, and they also go into schools and educate on food and climate change and things like that. And they're geared towards a younger demographic than the programs that we offer. So they might be a great asset for you as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Folks, I hate to do it, but I believe we need to wrap this up. We've got 2 minutes left on the clock, and I just want to take a moment to, again, thank Trevor. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you here today, inspiring all of us to play an active part in this fight against climate change and to, most importantly, keep a positive outlook on the future. We hope to have the opportunity to speak with you again very, very soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you all for your contributions too and questions. I have also developed a a kind of sustainable design activity too as a follow-up to this. If anyone is interested, I will pass that along to Karyn and see if that's either interested for your work, if you're an educator, as well as kind of any organization you're involved with.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'll make sure that we share that resource as well. Thanks for coming, everyone. We really appreciate your attendance today.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting.
Bye.